Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Our guest again today is Dr. Cynthia J. Young. She is the founder and CEO of CJ Young Consulting, LLC. So before I tell you a little bit more about her, Cindy, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
So we're going to have a real good conversation today about knowledge management. So let me tell you a little bit more about Cindy's background. She says on her LinkedIn bio, she helps organizations optimize human-centric knowledge to increase trust and support collaboration and inclusion. So we'll have a chance to dig deeper into all of that. She has been a TEDx speaker. You can find that online. She's been a contributor to HBR, and she is a U.S. Navy veteran, so thank you for your service, Cindy. She's also a curriculum developer and instructor with Leidos, an engineering and defense contractor. And final thing I'll say is I'm really looking forward to a webinar that Cindy's going to be presenting on February 10th. It's part of the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series. So you can look for a registration link in the show notes, or you can go to kainexus.com/webinars. So Cindy, before we talk about knowledge management, I know you are also a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. I was wondering if you could tell, as I asked many of our guests here, a little bit of your origin story of how you were introduced to Lean Six Sigma, where you got your initial training, how that came to be.
Okay, well, I first got involved I really like process improvement. I'm always looking at making things better, and we were having a problem at the last command I was at about how we bring people into our building for events.
And this is when you were still in the Navy.
Yes. Yeah, about 10 years ago. Actually, this is about 12 years ago. But that's when I discovered that we had an instruction about Lean Six Sigma. It came out in 2009, and I don't think it's actually been updated since then. But it was very much a surprise to my command about this Lean and Six Sigma instruction, what it was, what about, or green belts or black belts. And it said that we had to have a certain percentage at each command. So I said, well, that's something I should do when so I can retire and get a good job. Things have slightly changed. The shiny object now seems to be, unfortunately, the PMP, but there's so many things in common with PMP and Lean Six Sigma that I did pursue the whole Lean Six Sigma. I ran, my first event was a Kaizen event. We called it Butts and Seats. And I actually wrote an article about that for, I don't know, it wasn't Quality Progress. It's a Lean Six Sigma review. Mm-hmm. Crystal Davis helped me out with that.
Oh, and yeah. Crystal was a guest on here previously.
Yes, yes. And she's a good friend. So it's, that's something I've very much found that I enjoy, and I also, in particular, enjoy lean and value stream mapping. So I'm able to use that in other areas, and so it's just kind of grown with me, and it goes into every job I have, every task I do. I look at how to standardize things, how to make things work well. I'm not so much into statistics. In fact, my doctorate, it was a quantitative study, but I had to use YouTube and SPSS help to get a lot of stuff done.
Using YouTube for help and tips and instruction.
Yeah, no, how to use the software actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you've got a number of certifications. You are PMP certified. There's another certification through ASQ, the Certified Manager of Quality Organizational Excellence. You have that certification as well.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I'd be curious. You have an opportunity here maybe to synthesize those different approaches. So with the work that you do in knowledge management, how do you incorporate? Do you sort of take the best of those different approaches? There's probably a lot of overlap.
There is, and in fact, there's a lot of leadership and management practices in all three of those, that are helpful, and that I've kind of borrowed from a few places, trying a few things, and it just really helps. We had a meeting the other day with a coworker of mine, and I suggested, business practices, and we looked at how to conduct a meeting, just basic stuff. But we talked about it as far as project management. We also talked about its standardization. And so that was really helpful, even though that wasn't directly related to my job as a curriculum developer. it just makes everybody in the workplace have the same playbook.
So when you talk about playbooks, it seems like that's one way of describing perhaps at least one element of knowledge management. Thinking of that knowledge of how we do things. Before digging into some of that, can you define knowledge management and in the context of organizations? Like I'm sure, like myself, listeners know the two words, knowledge and management, but knowledge management as a field, as a discipline, how do you describe that?
Well, I define it more as a personal thing. And it's knowledge management is when you take the information that you have and you know what to do with it, such as, if I have an idea about something, I know I need to talk to the people and get people to collaborate on something. If I know something is going to be unsafe or be a detriment to quality, I know what to do in that aspect. So knowledge management is really just, do you share, do you transfer, do you collaborate? What do you do with that information you have?
So how much of that the challenge or the way that we help make knowledge management a reality, how much of that is a matter of leadership and culture, a culture of documenting and sharing things, and how much of that is a matter of the technology of how the knowledge is captured and shared?
It's huge in culture. If you think about it like communication, communication every day, however you come in and talk to people, or how do you talk to people remotely, that's a culture. Oh, we do it this way. Same thing with knowledge management. So, I use knowledge management practices almost daily, in everything I do. But when I was at my last company, we used it for business development. And, even though I was a knowledge manager at one point, business development has a really good opportunity for knowledge management because there are so many pieces and parts that go with building new customer bases and getting more contracts. And so what I did is I used mind mapping because it was an easy way to lay out the picture and be able to bring other people into it, because as a business development capture person, you don't want to be the only person doing the
Mm.
business capture. So you can do the explicit, the well codified knowledge, and then talk to other people and get them to give you what they know, what they've experienced, and that covers the tacit knowledge. And eventually, you come to a stopping point. You have to stop at some point, and you get a good picture about what the customer is or what the contract is you're trying to win, and everybody can get a good understanding by looking at the picture and talking about it as a team. And so that becomes part of the culture when you decide that, hey, we're not just going to go with the A team for business development. We're going to go with a team, an involved team where people have a say in, oh, I know this person, or I was with this company before, or I know this customer, he doesn't like this or she doesn't like this, just to give everybody a feeling that they are a part of the solution and not just a worker.
Mhm. I mean, when you talk about sales and business development, some things that I've seen or been exposed to going back over 20 years is, customer CRM systems, customer relationship management systems like Salesforce or HubSpot, or systems where people who are involved in enterprise sales are supposed to be logging and recording
Yes.
notes and progress, and it's almost like a non-clinical parallel to charting. As you're caring for patients, as you're engaged in the sale, you're supposed to be putting notes into the system. Do you have thoughts on the culture that helps encourage people to take the time to do that? Like as much as nurses and doctors sometimes will complain about the amount of time it takes to do charting,
Yes.
salespeople might complain about the amount of time it takes to get that knowledge out of their head and into a system. What are some of your thoughts or experiences on that?
Well, my experience first is it's sometimes there's just so much put down in the beginning that people resist it.
Hmm.
We had a CRM that we used to use, and there wasn't enough licenses to go around, so sometimes we'd have to timeshare it.
Hmm.
And because we did that, some people would forget to put things in, they'd have it in their notebook. So what we did is my VP would have a meeting with all of us once a week, and we'd go up to a big portal and we'd put all our information. It was a continuing growing page. It wasn't just, it was like a status update once, so you didn't have to talk about everything in the meeting. You could put it up ahead of time, people could read through it and then ask questions, use the meeting more, useful,
Right.
make it more useful. But CRMs, I think they're only good if people know how to use them. So as much as I like technology, I don't always try to pull out the best CRM, but I do know that that is a necessary thing. You have to have somewhere people can go and have access to it. And the other thing is findability. If you have access to it, you may not know where everything is findable and how to find it, or even have access to find it. I don't know how many times I've gone to a page and it says that, well, you don't have access to it. Why do you need access to it? Well, sometimes you don't even know what's behind it, so you have to do that. But yeah, CRM's a huge benefit to an organization, especially if it's a larger organization. But it's how it's used, if it's used at all.
And it seems like one of the barriers maybe to documenting, whether it's taking notes about a customer relationship through sales or through support once they've become a customer, documenting standardized work or procedures or whatever language you use. There's I think this old fear, and it's not that it doesn't exist anymore, but there's a fear that's been around for a long time that is sort of based on people saying, well, my value to the organization is partly the information that I have, the experience that I have. If I throw that all into a system, does that make me more replaceable? What's your response to a concern like that?
I would say that I firmly believe that knowledge sharing is important, because you need to be able to explain to people what it is you're writing down, because a note is not going to be end all of it. You got to have that conversation. There are some people that are afraid they're going to lose their job. Somebody else is going to get smarter than them or get their place in there. And that's not really the case. That's the case that happens is that person normally moves up in the company, and they're seen as more valuable to the company because they share what they know and they build their teams. And you educate your teams on how you do business by showing. So I think it's a fear that people just have to learn how to get through, but it takes a while.
And there's an article that Cindy wrote. I'll link to this in the show notes. 5 ways to protect yourself from a layoff using knowledge management, which sort of turns that scenario on its head. That sharing knowledge, like you said, demonstrates benefit and value to the organization. And the article, I think the way you stated it, resist hoarding knowledge. And again, I think that seems counterintuitive to people.
Well, it does, and it's just because they haven't seen the good in it. They may have been run over by somebody else who's gotten further in company because of maybe they've stolen something that they've known and been the first to report it. Kind of like when you're kids, your brother or your sister will go up to your parents and tell on you, and that doesn't work out well either. But it's all a matter of how you pose it, how you pose the knowledge you have.
And I'd be curious to hear more, like knowing a little bit about your career. I mean, this idea of sharing knowledge has been really beneficial to you. So this isn't just like this theoretical idea that well, sharing knowledge could be or should be beneficial. Can you share a little more about your story and how that's sort of case in point, sharing information instead of hoarding it has led to promotions and new opportunities?
Well, the whole time I was in the military, it's all about getting the mission done. I was in the Navy for 23 years, and I had to, at one point I was enlisted, so I was working for other people, and I was doing, individual things, and I wasn't quite putting the pieces together because I didn't know what was going on. I was, too junior to be able to be brought in the big conversations. And then I got my commission. And when you get to a ship and you're a commissioned officer, there's very few of you. So you have to do multiple things. And then you have to make sure your teams are getting ready, or your divisions or your departments are getting up to speed on what's going on. And there was one point where 2 days before deployment, one of my sailors, she got pregnant, and she was one of my qualified people to work the EHF, enhanced high frequency communications. Well, I only had one other person there that could do that. And luckily, they were both up to the same skills. They understood what was going on and they talked. But more importantly, she talked to other people on the ship. And so it was good for the overall knowledge base. And then as I moved to being a contractor, after I retired and I was a contractor, knowledge sharing was helpful for our team because there were times when we talked to the customer separately. And so when I would tell the rest of my team, what was going on or what I had experienced with the customer or what the customer was asking me, they could be ready for it too. Because, working for a government customer is a little bit of a challenge. It's a lot different than working for a bank or something like that. It's a whole different level of, I'm in charge and you're not. So as a contractor, it's really good for us to share what we know. And then we're able to take a break and step away from, our email or take a day off or, that kind of thing. So it's been really helpful. And what helped me get promoted was the fact that I knew about knowledge sharing and I'm open to knowledge sharing. I built my team up on knowledge sharing and making sure they help cover each other. And they didn't look at it as, well, I won't get that pay raise. No, I made sure everybody got taken care of. But, the knowledge sharing, resisting knowledge hoarding, and as well as communicating on a daily basis. Those are all things, and those made the teams I worked on, as well as the teams that I managed, stronger. And then they started training other people.
Yeah. So it really then becomes a culture of knowledge sharing.
Yes, and I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and you'd think others would too, because the perceived benefit of keeping information to yourself has got to be offset by the benefits then of having better access to information that you need. Connecting things to lean principles, it seems like knowledge management helps us break down silos,
right,
to improve the flow of work. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm always harping on people I work with are knowledge, skills, and abilities. And you need to know who has what knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we had a process in place at my last company that we worked on, and myself and one of the senior engineers, we got together with HR and said, there's got to be an easier way to find how to fill positions than with just getting people to give their resumes. So what we did is we started going to every single person, have them provide what their skills were, and we gave them checks. So all they do was check blocks and what areas they worked in. And then we could also, they made it, HR made it into a database that you could search, and that way you could find out what people are doing. So it kind of goes in that lean waste of non-utilized talent. You're not hiring new people and spending more money training people and having a gap, but you had people that were already there that maybe they could have been better utilized other places, or maybe they were looking for new challenges. And that saves you money. Plus, it keeps that corporate knowledge in the company. So it's a benefit all around. It makes HR's life easier. It makes whoever is managing that contract easier, and also makes that person feel more valuable because they're being brought in and told that, hey, they have the skills and abilities and the knowledge to be able to do this, and they would like to give them this opportunity, and it helps them grow and make more money, which is really sometimes the only factor people look at when they look at transitioning jobs.
So thinking more about connections between knowledge management and lean, Cindy, I mean, there would be applications of lean to knowledge management, maybe applications of knowledge management to lean. Like,
yes.
how do you see those connections? Which of those connections are maybe most important?
Well, if you look at just in time, for logistics, and you're looking for a part, knowledge wise, I would know that I would need certain parts. Well, logistics wise, the logistician will know, okay, well, these people are the ones that are always looking for these parts, And so if I can order these and have these on my shelf, then I'm making their lives easier. And then it goes around and makes a better working relationship. That's always been a challenge, because my life has been mostly in the government area. It's always a challenge, especially when you come to end of fiscal year and you have to spend some money. Where do you spend it? So that also helps you because you know, logisticians know where the money can be spent. They don't have to buy a bunch of paper and pencils to eat it up. They can go, and then it also makes all of our lives easier if you have people that know what other people are doing in the company, because that way you can not cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it seems like part of that need to know what's going on leads to people wanting to pull information, needing to pull information instead of just having it pushed at you. I mean, like in organization, a lot of times the emails that come to you feels like a push of information of like, is that information relevant to me? Is that something I need to spend time processing, or can that information be out there in a way where I can request it, search for it, find it on a pull basis? It seems like an effective knowledge management process and system would save us time because we're able to access kind of what we need when we need it, kind of related to this idea of just-in-time knowledge. What are
Yeah.
some thoughts about that?
Well, it also can be used if you look at customer experiences. If a customer is after hours and they need to go somewhere, so they might go to a bot and ask a bot questions. Well, the bot, if the humans know what kind of information the customers are looking for, they can set the bot up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So then that's when you're getting the technology involved. But if that technology stops working, then you need people to know what's going on. So you may want to have that standardized playbook there, as well as giving your people the autonomy to use what they know about it before they say, well, I can't answer this question. I got to pass you off to somebody else, because that's going to keep your customers with you. That's going to keep, customers happy, but it's also going to make your team happy because they don't feel useless.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like whether it's through the ability to search or to ask a bot or to find a chat agent as a customer, you're trying to find information, and it seems like we want to, in lean language, reduce the wasted motion
Mm-hmm. Yes.
involved in typing or clicking or searching or waiting.
It's because it's very frustrating when you're put on hold and you have to wait for somebody else to tell you, "Oh, I'm sorry, you came the wrong person." Most of us are
Yeah.
patient enough with one or two people, but when you have to go past two, you just want to hang up.
Yeah.
But then you got to start over again.
Well, and that's something that irritates me as a customer, the lack of knowledge management of, you call in and you tell your story to one person,
Mm-hmm.
and then you might even hear it sounds like they're maybe taking notes, and then you get transferred and you feel like you're completely starting over.
Right,
Like,
because they don't know that. So that knowledge transfer is so important. Knowledge transfer being one way, pushing up information, and knowledge sharing being a discussion. There really should be a transfer of knowledge pushed about what they know about the customer before the other person picks up the phone. And then there needs to be a backup where they share it somewhere so that it gets put somewhere. But then you're going to need to have somebody else go into there and make sure, just kind of like with lessons learned, where they clear out the old outdated data and information, and they make sure it's most up to date with what your systems are and what your people are working with.
yeah. So you can have defects in that knowledge management system, like you said, either things that are out of date or possibly just flat out incorrect. We'd want
Yeah.
to try to minimize that.
Yeah, or you get where you get multiple versions of something,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to finalize it, and you have to ask that question. Well, which one's most up to date?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just strictly go off the date on the document, because you open that document once, change a letter or correct a spelling, close it. That might be the wrong document.
Yeah.
So you have to talk to people and have somebody's got to be there to manage that.
And I think you raised an interesting point in that scenario. Let's say if your information getting passed along from phone agent to phone agent, that push sounds very helpful. And rather than being dogmatic about push versus pull. It seems like there's a principle. I was just reading a little bit here. There's a definition that I found of lean knowledge management as, and this will sound familiar, whether we're talking about inventory or medications or what have you, getting the right information in the right form to the right people at the right time. So if you're transferring a caller, it seems reasonable that the information about that caller and their customer service need would get passed along with the caller so that the agent doesn't then have to take time to go search or pull it up, which is going to waste some of their emotion, waste the customer's time.
And we could always do a Gamble walkthrough for that. See what they're dealing with.
So I'm talking about kind of following the flow of information.
Yeah, find out what happens.
Yeah.
Well, find out if you're in a call center, you can walk from one person and see what they do physically, what they're doing to pass somebody off to somebody else if they have to, and see if they send them a document with it, or if it's a requirement in their processes to look at the notes before they pick up answer that phone line. What are they going to do? When does it stop? When does that person finally say, "Let me talk to your manager," kind of thing?
Yeah.
And then what does the manager know about it? Because the manager may not know. My manager might just pick up the phone and go, "Hi, this is so and so. How can I help you?" And then they get screamed at.
And I've learned, thinking of, let's say, calling in for help or support, never tell the long version of the story before you've confirmed you're in the right place with the right person, because there's nothing worse than telling the long version of the story and then being told, "Oh, okay, I'll transfer you."
Yeah, no, I've been on the thing saying, did anybody tell you what I'm calling about? And I'll be told, "No, I need to know first what's your name and what's your number or whatever." So yeah, I don't really like doing that.
No. There's probably also, it seems like, possible waste involving capturing information that doesn't get used. What are your thoughts on trying to figure out as an organization, what's worth documenting? Are we always able to easily predict what knowledge is going to be worthwhile now or later?
I hadn't really thought about that, but I would think, if you're at a meeting and you're taking minutes, you don't necessarily need to write every single note, but you just want to hit the high points. So, when I was a young knowledge manager, I had to take minutes at community practice calls. I would just have the agenda lined up and just take notes that went to the agenda. The what came out of it, what the future work was going to be that came out of that. If we had a problem, what was the solution? I didn't write so and so said this, so and so said that, unless I had to put a name to an action. But I'd have to give that a lot more thought, though.
Well, there's a difference between good meeting minutes and a transcript.
Yeah, I don't need a transcript.
Meeting minutes capture probably just what were the key decisions, what are the key things that need to be passed along for people who missed the meeting or just for future reference.
Well, yeah, and we were required to publish our minutes because not everybody could always make the community practice meeting, so we would have to publish those, and we'd have to have a really quick turnaround because there was actions there that need quick turnarounds.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you've talked a lot about personal benefits to knowledge management. There are some organizational benefits then that go hand in hand. So thinking about kind of what's typical in the realm of knowledge management, what would you say are some kind of particular good practices that you haven't touched on already? Other good practices that are worth sharing?
Oh, there are a lot.
Knowledge management about knowledge management here.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So one thing is when you've got something and you don't want to forget it, write it down. But then write it down and put it in the same place all the time, because you have a person that might come to work and maybe you're turning over to them. If you're a shift worker or something like that, you need to turn things over. Have a standardized place to put things. Just like sort, straighten all that stuff.
Mhm.
You want to have the notes in the same place. You also want to have the same format when you capture knowledge. When you have to put something somewhere, naming conventions are very important. I even do this at home, even though my email is terrible. My personal email, I'm a terrible knowledge manager. I usually just use a search button. But when you're filing things, if you could look at my OneDrive, you would see when I put my dates, I put year, 2022 01, and then I guess today's 10th, yeah, or 11th.
Oh, it's
So
actually it's
it'd
the
be
11th. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be 2022 01 22 or 11.
Mhm.
And so that's how I date my receipts. That's how I date documents I write, and I always put my first name. you know, if I'm saying something off and it doesn't have a particular date, I'll put my name, I'll put young, and I'll put underscore. And so I do these things so I can find things easily, especially dates. Um, it's there's a lot of things I do. I do actually have a Kaizen, or not Kaizen, a Kanban board behind this monitor right now,
Mhm.
and I have a way I've aligned what I'm doing. But these are, I color code things, things that make it easy for me to find things, because like I said before, findability is so important. So if you're going to use a SharePoint portal, which I'm kind of crawling into the technology side, if you're going to have a SharePoint portal, you need to make sure that where your housing information is able to be found and used by the people, but not only used but understood what it means. So, don't just send somebody that email saying, okay, this document's here. Well, why is this important to me? The what's in it for me, but why is it important to me? And those are just a few things that I do with knowledge management. It's there's a lot more. There's a lot of books out there about it, but just what do you use on a daily basis? And one other tool I would say is map out knowledge. I recommend knowledge mapping when people come into a job, because when they first get there, they have no idea who anybody is. So you come in and you might start with an org chart, or you might have a space. If you're working in an office where people are actually in the office, know where their desks are and kind of take notes about what their job is and what their contact information is, who's on your team. That way, you know where to go to find out how to do something or find out what the process is. You know, and I'll lie. I have one more. If you
Okay.
use
Yeah.
the business practice business process management system, that's also a very useful knowledge management tool. Yeah.
So knowledge mapping is really a way of mapping where certain knowledge exists or with who.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially like say you need to go travel. If you're brand new, you have no idea what the travel procedures are, and there's probably a standard operating procedure about how to do travel, but it's not always that easy. If you don't understand, well, go to the travel system. What travel system?
Mhm.
Well, if you have somebody in your space that's the travel expert, or even HR that works in your space, you can go to them. But if you're brand new, you may not know who that is. And we've had that happen where we have brand new people that come to our company, and they need to get their email set up, and they need to order a travel card. How do they do that? And if they at least know where to start, they can get it done. Rather than just have a line of directions.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that's, I think, interesting to think about as a company grows. Thinking of KaiNexus, as a software company that's grown, over 10 years. More specialized functions that people have as we have more people, the work
Mhm.
that people do tends to be more specialized. There's still a high degree of collaboration in the company. That's a good thing about the culture. But my role with KaiNexus is very part-time. And as the company has grown and new people come on board and some people's roles have changed, there are times where there's some sort of information or some sort of question that I have, and I kind of freeze. I'm like, I don't know who to go to anymore.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, a little bit smaller team and different people in different roles I would have known. So I end up going to either Greg Jacobson as the CEO, like sorry to bother the CEO, I know you're busy, Greg, or if you have one other key person of like, who should I be talking to?
Yeah.
Are there things that we can do other than going to kind of a human traffic cop to help understand? I guess that's where
Yeah.
like doing some formal knowledge mapping goes beyond an org chart. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I have in fact, if you go to my website, I have educational videos I've created, little doodly videos, like 3 minutes long, and one of them is about knowledge mapping. And so, you can go in there and I show you how I use an org chart to start with, but then you also look at other things like if you're a logistician, you have a logistics center, where does that information feed into? Who do they go to pull the knowledge from or to get the information about the next, you know, load or whatever they need? Who's the main point of contact for that? So it does get away from the basic org chart, but you also have to realize that there are places people need to go to as well. There might be a safe things are kept in our filing cabinet, that, or like I said earlier, the BPMS, the business process management system, that you may have to go to access things.
Yeah. And Cindy's website, and we'll mention this again at the end, it's cjyoungconsulting.com. I should have mentioned that up front.
Yeah.
I just, this random thought come back to me. Thinking, we talk about hoarding information and knowledge management and helping people navigate an organization. My first full-time job out of college, which longtime listeners will know, was at General Motors, and General Motors in 1995 had its dysfunctions and quirks. But I remember asking the plant manager's executive assistant for an org chart because I was new to the company. I was trying to figure out who I would need to talk to or work with for different things. And I'll never forget, and I can still picture this interaction. And she said, "Oh, we don't publish, we don't share the organizational chart because people use that to recruit people away."
Yeah.
Like whatever benefit they had, real or perceived, from not sharing the org chart with an employee, I think that was far outweighed by like me having to kind of cobble together my own knowledge and draw it out on a page of my Franklin planner of who does what and who's the manager over what area. That was part of my knowledge management at the time, the Franklin planner.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We use that a lot in the Navy. So, but in the Navy, we do keep, in the Navy, we did keep org charts off the websites, but we still let the commands use those.
Yeah.
We're expected to, because you had to know who was the weapons officer, who was the combat systems officer, who's the engineer, the CO, the XO at any time.
Yeah.
Because you had to reach out to them. We didn't stay in our own ship. That wasn't our little silo. But yeah, the org chart, you have to share it. How are you going to do business if you don't know who in the business you need to talk to?
Yeah, it seemed exceedingly paranoid. Like it seemed like a story you might hear about a modern startup company or something.
Well,
telling people,
you got LinkedIn now.
Well, I was just going to say, like, some company might tell their people, like, don't have a LinkedIn profile because, when people have LinkedIn profiles, they just get recruited away. I don't think that's getting to the root cause of the problem.
No, and LinkedIn, I think, is a great knowledge management tool. Quite honestly, we share a lot of tips and tricks on there, and we also can reach out to other companies if we have a friend that needs a job or is looking for a job. We just kind of go there and we look up and see who the connections are. Unless they have it set for private,
Mm-hmm.
we can look and see who has connections, and we reach out to them. It's a great tool. I mean, that's how they're making all their money with their sales navigator.
And people buying subscriptions to that service.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. I think it's been interesting to see how LinkedIn has evolved over 20 years. It really started off as just a sort of static collection of resumes. Or profiles. So you have that level of information. Who is this person? Are they a real person? Who do they work for? Who do they say they work for? Who have they worked for in the past? I mean, it's the information, like any knowledge management system. It's only as accurate as what people have put into it. But now, LinkedIn has sort of evolved to become more of a social network, a social media platform, and with that runs the risk of, like you said, there's knowledge, there are good tips, and then not to get down this rat hole, but sadly there's things that might be labeled as misinformation or
Yes.
disinformation. So, I mean, what are your thoughts, Cindy, on, even if it's internally, how does a knowledge management platform help people gauge like what is actually accurate and valid, especially if there's conflicting information? How do we help manage that?
Honestly, I think it's people. We have to take an active. We can't rely on the computers to tell us what's they can tell us what's up to date based on accessing the system, but if we don't know, if we don't understand what we're looking at, then we don't really have a place in looking at to start with. But if I'm staying with somebody, or we're both looking at the same customer information, and I know that this customer is looking at changing, their sales, or changing what they're selling, or who they're buying product from, and the other person doesn't, then I'm going to know, what changes are coming about. And so I'm going to know whether or not the information is accurate too, because of things I may be doing, who I'm maybe talking to, or activities I may be doing, whereas the other person's not going to. So really, it's not really a matter of the system. It's people. We have to be involved in what's going on. We can't just expect that. Oh yeah, we put it on a SharePoint portal, everybody's going to read it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
You've got to be active.
So, we're talking about some good practices with knowledge management, and one thing I like talking about is mistakes and lessons learned. I've got my coffee
Yes.
mug from different podcast series. I do my favorite mistake. What are some common mistakes, Cindy, that people make with knowledge management, individually or in an organization? We've already touched on the mistake of hoarding information.
Right.
What are some other mistakes?
Well, I think. Well, when you don't acknowledge that knowledge is wrong, that somebody is misinterpreting knowledge, you have to be clear about what you're sharing. Sharing is great, but you got to make sure it's accurate. So when people guess, say if they guess at numbers, oh yeah, well that number may be a big error. So you want to have accurate knowledge to share, and so you got to do your homework before you share it. When you transfer it, when you're doing the one way push, you know don't I had a math chief that worked with me, and he told me he didn't read below the line, below the preview pane. So if you're sharing knowledge, don't go the whole page and expect everybody's going to read everything, because they're not. So you got to look at your email practices, got to look at your social media practices of what you share. So if you're going to be sharing on one platform, have a particular idea of who you want to reach. Another thing you want to do. Oh, let me see. Well, with knowledge management, you want to make sure that if you're using a method of sharing, that other person's good at using that method. So if somebody only reaches their email once a day, don't send email multiple times a day and expect them to look at it. Don't be afraid to call somebody. You need to talk to people, because a lot of times when you communicate with people, they want to ask questions, and they better understand what you're telling them if they can ask clarifying questions. And there's a lot more, but
Yeah, well, and there's a lot more that Cindy has shared in different ways. The knowledge that she is sharing on her website, again, cjyoungconsulting.com. I'll put links to that article I mentioned, the TEDx talk that Cynthia did. That TEDx talk was titled "A Knowledge Mindset: What You Know Comes from Where You Sit." How would you summarize, like, what's sort of the above the preview line summary of the TEDx talk for people to go and watch that?
Yes. So it's when you have somebody that's senior at a company, don't hold out on telling your other people to have to execute what's going on, or why they're executing it. If they have something that they need done right now, explain to them why they need have it done right now, and give them some input. Let them have some input as well, because the seats are different. If I'm the worker bee and you're the VP, I'm not going to have any idea of why it's important to you, or what I need to know about, unless you tell me. And I'm not going to feel trusted I'm not going to feel included in the discussion. I'm going to feel like you're treating me like a worker bee.
Hmm.
So that's why I encourage people, to remember, knowledge based on where you sit is not always a good thing.
So I hope people will go check out the video. I'll link to that in the show notes. And then again, coming up on February 10th, the webinar that Cindy's going to be presenting, the title of that is Common Methods to Benefit Organizational Knowledge Management and Continuous Improvement Efforts. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of what you'll be sharing in the webinar?
Yeah, there's a lot of tools and techniques that we use, such in process improvement. We use check sheets, checklists. We use Kanban boards. Those kind of things are not just tools for process improvement or continuous improvement. You can also use those in other areas, such as knowledge management. And when you use the similar tools in other areas and you find different uses for them, you save a company a lot of money because you don't have to buy new things. You're not looking for the newest gadget. If it works, it works. And you don't have to retrain people on how to use it, just to show people why you're using it differently here or why you're using it the same way here. And that's what, so we're going to talk about, I think, about 9 or 10 tools, maybe a little more than that.
So I'll look forward to that, and there'll be a chance to dig deeper into some of these approaches. That webinar is open to all, anyone who's interested in that, KaiNexus customer or otherwise. KaiNexus customers use KaiNexus as a knowledge management tool for their improvement work and their standard operating procedures and performance measures. And so I think people are trying to get better, especially around these different knowledge management approaches. It'll be interesting for a wide range of people. So Cindy's website, again, cjyoungconsulting.com. And there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about before we go, something that you do called a knowledge management bootcamp. Tell us,
yes.
What is that? Who is that targeted toward?
All right. Well, that's my course that I have, and registration is going to open on the 17th of January. For the course that starts on the 7th of February. It's a 5-week course, 10 modules. It's got a great workbook. I've interviewed 6 KM experts that you can also hear from about how they see things in different industries they've worked in, and it's a tool. It's a course that is going to help people that want to either improve their problem solving skills, so they're not overlooked anymore. And so they're seen as somebody that their organization can count on to be pulled into other areas that may not be specifically in theirs, that they can look at getting rid of the silos. You're still going to have your little spots, but getting rid of the stopgaps between the 2 silos or 3 silos or 5 silos. But the kind of people that would want to sign up for a course like this would be, new professionals or professionals that maybe want to change how they're seen at work, or professionals that just want to grow and upskill.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Well, I hope people can check that out. They can learn more, again, cjyoungconsulting.com. And thank you for doing the podcast today. Thank you in advance for doing the KaiNexus webinar.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. So again, our guest has been Dr. Cynthia J. Young. She, you see listed in the show notes and on the page, all the letters, PMP certification, the LSS, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and the CMQ-OE. That's a certification that was new to me. That sounds like something that would be interesting to go check out.
It's great, especially if you're a manager and you're also interested in process improvement. It all feeds together.
Yeah, both good. Thank you. Thank you again, Cindy. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to ask you too. Also, I see a cat. Just a quick detour, sunning itself in the window.
Oh, that's Buddy.
That's Buddy.
That's our only boy cat. Yeah, he reached out one day to my husband. My husband was in Petco. He reached out and tried to get him. And so my husband sent me a picture and said, we're going to adopt him. Because in Chesapeake, you can only adopt 4 cats before you get a fostering license. And we're not going to be around to foster. But, so we have 4 cats, and he's our 4th cat. Well, Buddy, he's the only boy cat, so now he's got more testosterone in the house.
Buddy looks very happy laying there.
He's a very comfortable kitty. He's only 2 years old.
Good. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and Buddy, thanks for being quiet and sunning yourself there.